Now, a few days back, I did a spoiler-free review of the first phase of the High Republic era, and if you're someone who's maybe on the fence about whether or not to get into this, I'd suggest skipping this video and checking that one out instead for an honest as possible review of it as I could give, and a link to it will be in the comments and description below. Though to spoil it a bit, I guess, or to give you the really quick review of it, it is something that, though not perfect, it is something I end up recommending to those who already enjoy Star Wars books and or comics. It is worth the time investment if you already enjoy reading Star Wars. All that said, in this video I'll be getting a bit more into the story itself, though still keeping this as an overview more or less. I won't be getting into all the nitty-gritty details or doing much speculating about what comes next. Though in the future, I will try to cover more of what's going on in the canon and in the High Republic stories if that's what people want me to do. And so to start out, the basic idea behind the story is that the Republic, some 200 years before the events of the prequel trilogy, is expanding out and beginning to settle or colonize the Outer Rim, and along with the Jedi, they, the Republic, have created a space station called Starlight Beacon to basically be a symbol of hope and unity for the galaxy as they expand. It's a station that will always broadcast a message or signal to help guide those who brave the frontier, because the area, the Outer Rim, is mainly unexplored and only a few hyperspace lanes even have been discovered or mapped out, so it makes travel there very difficult. And the station is also a place where pretty much anyone can come at any time for aid or assistance should they need it. Along with this, it will then act as a sort of base of operations for the Jedi who will be patrolling and safeguarding the frontier. It's kind of like the Rangers of the American Wild West back in the day, or at least that's how it was originally kind of described. It never really exactly feels like that, however, or like that's the point of the story, to explore the frontier, I mean. The whole idea of expansion feels, or better or worse, more like an unexplored backdrop for the major events and conflicts of the time, which are with the Nihil and the Drenger, though only the former truly takes center stage, while the latter, the Drenger, feel more like to use a video game term here, they kind of feel more like a side quest some of the Jedi partake in, despite us being teased with an interesting history for them that's connected to the Sith, which they never really get too much into. Along with this, you don't really spend a whole lot of time on Starlight Beacon itself, or learn exactly what it is, or what it's really for, or how it works. It's kind of portrayed as this huge, grand place where all these different people will come together with the Jedi, and where it will always be busy and, full of life and excitement. But the one story that really kind of focuses on it, or takes place primarily on it, that being the adult novel The Fallen Star, the last in the trilogy, it kind of makes it feel small, and like only a handful of people, be they Jedi or others, are actually on it. It's like this centerpiece to the whole thing, to the whole time period, or maybe I should say the whole story of this time period, that never quite feels like a centerpiece. So when it gets destroyed and it falls out of the sky, quite literally, you don't quite feel the sense of loss or defeat that maybe you should for the Jedi and the Republic, or on the flip side, the sense of accomplishment and or victory you should feel for the Nihil that were responsible for destroying it. I mean, it's basically this brand new thing that only lasts for a short amount of time, and it doesn't feel all that important anyway. It never really gets built up the way I think it should. Whereas I think you're really supposed to feel, and you do to some extent, don't get me wrong, you're supposed to feel like this has knocked the Jedi down a peg or two or three, that this is a defining moment for both the Nihil and the Jedi Order, but for different reasons, obviously. And you could almost see some vague similarities between this story, the story of Starlight Beacon, and the Jedi of this time, to something like the story of the Tower of Babel, where the Jedi were starting to think a bit too highly of themselves, that they were a little too proud of all they'd done and accomplished, even strutting around in golden robes and such. And I've always assumed this pride and or vanity is the true cause or reason behind the Jedi's fall, as seen in the prequel trilogy, of course, that they started to think they were infallible and that no threat was too great for them to handle, and hence that's why Palpatine or Darth Sidious was able to defeat them, and why they were losing their connection to the Force, as stated in the prequels. Simply put, they were more worried about following the will of the Republic. They were too entwined with it. They were too much of a part of the Republic instead of something that just safeguarded it. They were trying to perfect the galaxy instead of just listening to the will of the Force and safeguarding it for others to follow their own path. There are even in this time period, I guess you could call them Qui-Gon Jinn-like Jedi, who call themselves Wayseekers, who operate completely independent of the Council, which at first had me a little worried that they were going to embrace the idea of gray Jedi who seek to use both the light side and the dark side. And if you know me, if you've heard my videos on this, I'm not really a fan of the idea, which let's not get into that here. Anyway, they're just kind of focused on following the will of the Force, which you could certainly argue is what the Jedi should focus on. That's what they should be. Not so worried about the Council and all of these other kind of things that they do get too entwined in, as again seen in the prequel trilogy. And speaking of all that, this does feel a little bit like a prequel to the prequels, or where one of the goals is to really set up that time period and the eventual fall of the Jedi, again being where their pride and their vanity leads them into believing there is nothing they cannot handle. We even have things like Ki-Adi-Mundi in the prequels kind of scoffing at the possible return of the Sith. Certainly we have dealt with them, and they could never return. In fact, that's kind of where the Jedi keep going wrong in this time period or in these stories, at least against the Nihil. They keep underestimating them at every single turn. At first, they barely even know about them. They barely even acknowledge their existence or even care. The Nihil are just seen as this small, kind of semi-dangerous group of space Vikings that do their thing until they cause the great hyperspace disaster, which was basically them using something called the paths, and more on them in a second, to crash a ship into another ship going through hyperspace, which caused a huge explosion and then sent debris across the galaxy, coming out of hyperspace all over the place and crashing into many different planets and causing many catastrophes all at once, or one right after the other. And the first half of the first book, Light of the Jedi, is more or less devoted to the Jedi doing all they can to prevent as much damage and death as they can, and there's a lot of sacrifice, there's a lot of surprises. It's a really good read, that first half of that first book, whereas it kind of gets a little slower in the second half. But anyway, they can't prevent anywhere near all of it, and it's really exciting to see the Jedi both sacrificing and failing and doing all they can to prevent this disaster from carrying on. And so it's then this event which is truly the catalyst and or backdrop for the entire story, which is something I don't exactly love. I don't like the idea of using hyperspace, a hyperspace disaster to begin all of this, mainly because you open up a whole huge can of worms or questions about why nothing like that had happened before. Why had a ship never blown up in hyperspace before, be it from engine failure or whatever else it might be? And why had debris never rained across the galaxy? Why were they completely unprepared for this possibility? It is very similar to how the Holdo maneuver opens up all kinds of questions there as well as to why that was never done before, why hyperspace had never been weaponized, especially since we have this disaster in the past now, which really probably would have got some wheels turning in some people's heads about what we could do with hyperspace to use it as a weapon. And no, I don't want to get too deep into that debate here or those questions here now, so I'll just say, personally, I just prefer that hyperspace, more or less, be left alone, if you will. It's something that the story primarily just uses to get characters from point A to B. We don't need every single rule about it explained, or else you're going to cause problems or contradictions like they kind of do here. Which isn't to say I think it should be ignored entirely. I like something like the paths that the Nihil use. I thought that was a really cool and clever idea, that you had a person who could essentially instantly calculate new hyperspace lanes and fly across the galaxy and use this to their advantage in combat. I don't think this breaks anything, or at least doesn't break it too badly, because we do already know hyperspace lanes are what they use to travel. So it's not impossible that a human or an alien, though she is human, that someone could be able to calculate these paths and again use it to their advantage in combat or whatever the case may be. But anyway, going back to the Great Disaster, it's this event that the Nihil used to get on the radar of the Jedi after they, again, just didn't really care about them, despite the fact that the Nihil, yes, have caused all kinds of problems before. They are a threat, especially in the Outer Rim, which the Jedi are, in their point of view, now invading. Which again, all this does play into this sort of pride or vanity that the Jedi have and would throughout the story, because, like I was saying before, the Jedi just keep on underestimating the Nihil, and it keeps costing them dearly. They never quite take them seriously enough, and each time the Nihil end up winning, basically. And all three books in the main storyline feature another way or another event in which the Jedi fail against the Nihil, or are outsmarted by them, or just fail to take them seriously enough, or think they have them defeated, or whatever the case may be, and they end up paying the price. And I'm happy to say it does work. You do buy them making all of these mistakes, because you can see the similarities between them, the Jedi of this time, and, say, the Jedi of the prequel era, what led to their downfall. And you can see how this is setting that up. You can see that the Jedi really do think that highly of themselves, and that it is a problem for them. Though maybe it's setting it up too well, because you wonder how this event or these events with the Nihil didn't prepare them better for the reemergence of the Sith 200 years later. Not that these two threats are exactly on the same level, but it does prove to the Jedi at this time that they are not infallible, that there are problems that will arise, and yet when the Sith come back around, they are just completely unprepared to stop them. Though I suppose it could be that they just didn't learn their lesson, or that their takeaway from all of this is to be even more proactive in the galaxy, to get more involved with the Republic instead of listening to the will of the Force like they should have. But anyway, speaking of the Nihil, they do maybe feel a bit generic to me. I liked their leader, Marchirian Ro. I'm interested in his past, which is a comic series. There is a comic series that just started that is going to explore it, and how he and his father before him, they've been keeping Mari Santeca and using her for the past, and that's kind of been controlling the Nihil. There is some interest there with him, but beyond him, and perhaps maybe Laruna D to some extent too, there's just not much to them that I care about. I'm also waiting and wanting to learn more about these creatures that he uses or knows about to fight against the Jedi, these creatures that cause them to become just completely overcome by fear, and then to turn to dust because of it, which sounds a little odd if you haven't been reading it and you're just hearing about this now. And I'm not too sure what to think about this just yet. So far, we haven't got much about that at all, and I'm wondering if in Phase 2, which is going back even further in time, which seems like a strange decision, but whatever, I'm wondering if we can learn more about them there somehow. Either way, the Nihil are certainly better and more interesting villains all around than the Drengir are or were. As mentioned before, they felt more like a side quest for the Jedi to handle in a few issues of the comics, despite the fact that their history seemed pretty or potentially interesting, since it was the Sith who actually imprisoned them originally, using these statues that the Jedi had found and mistakenly moved, thinking they were the problem since they could sense the dark side on them, not realizing they were actually containing something, that being the Drengir. But once released, they never really feel like a threat. We're told they are, that they're spreading across the galaxy and that things are really, really bad with them. But then they're just kind of stopped and everyone moves on from them. Plus, I couldn't put the whole Little Shop of Horrors images out of my mind with them always talking about meat and wanting to eat. Plain and simple, they just didn't work. They felt like filler. And I'm not sure if I hope we eventually get more about them, get their history to maybe hopefully make them better, or if I'd rather they just completely forget they ever existed. And now we come to what was easily the best part of the High Republic era, in my opinion, that being the Jedi themselves. And of all the Star Wars I have read in my life, and that is a lot of Star Wars, I feel like some of the best exploration of the internal workings of the Jedi mind was actually done here. These are Jedi that are rightfully shown to love and have friendships and close bonds with their fellow Jedi and some others. Mainly it's the Master-Padawan bond that is explored here, but there are certainly others, especially between Stel and Avar and Elzar, and how they struggle with thoughts and feelings for each other. And it's all or mostly done exceptionally well. We can connect with these characters and understand their struggles, all the while admiring the fact that they usually do make the right, all too often very difficult decisions as Jedi. They do sacrifice and can let go when needed to. These are Jedi at the height of the Order, which of course is again part of the problem because there is that underlying vanity there, a bit too much focus on celebration and ceremony, and not just doing what the Force requires of them, which the Wayseeker Jedi are a nice contrast for. They do kind of show the other side, the way they probably should be operating. And this is more or less what I do imagine the life of a Jedi to be like, that yeah, it is always a struggle to some degree to manage your attachments, but that you can do it, it can be done, and that Jedi can still be very happy and quite content and fulfilled with their lives living this way. As you may know, my last few videos have been all about this topic, about Jedi and attachments, and I think the High Republic era does a good job of exploring it and helping us to see the world or the Star Wars galaxy through their eyes and why they accept this way of life without being miserable, as some seem to think they are, by not allowing themselves attachments. And again, at least for me, as I said a moment ago, the Jedi are easily the best part of the High Republic era, as they arguably should be. It does take some time to get to know them all. There are quite a few of them, and at first they do kind of all blend together and feel a bit generic until they really start to differentiate themselves and to feel like distinct individuals. Their stories become far, far more interesting, and the whole period feels far more interesting as you get to know them, because they are the driving force of the whole story. And they all do face their own set of similar yet unique challenges. Even Avar Kriss, who was described as the best of the best going into this, is far from perfect. And I see a lot of people who haven't read any of this always bringing her up like she is going to be part of this woke garbage. But quite honestly, especially in the books, most of the main and best characters are actually the male characters. They tend to be handled even better than the females, so go figure. The other thing then that gets made fun of a lot by those who haven't read this is Geode, the living rock character. And to some extent, he rightfully so does get made fun of because he is kind of a pointless addition to the story. And right in the story, he gets played for as a joke. I'm not entirely sure why they included him, whose idea this is, and why they actually ran with it. But for better or worse, like I just said, even in the story, they recognize how ridiculous he is, which again makes you ask, what is the point? So all in all here, that's my basic spoiler review of the High Republic era. It's not perfect, but the good easily outweighs the bad, and the highlight is absolutely the Jedi themselves, which I'm very happy about. I expected this to sort of be a setup for the prequels while also trying to be its own thing, of course, to some extent. And I think it's pulling off both pretty well, actually. I'm just curious to see where this goes next, why it's taking us further back in time instead of progressing the story we've been following. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you've thought of the High Republic era, and if you'd like me to cover more of it, especially as we approach Phase 2. Are you interested in it? Should this be something I focus more on? Like I said, I do want to focus more on the canon stuff, so I'm open to it as long as people are open to watching it. Either way, let me know what you thought about this video or about the High Republic era in those comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.